And we are live. Welcome into the Fieldhouse Files live post-game show as the Pacers take game 4 easily. It was over basically in the first quarter. The final tonight, 121-89. Third largest win in margin of victory in franchise history. The previous high, or current still high, remains 2018 and a 34-point win over the Cleveland Cavaliers. But I gotta love the fact that the Pacers kind of followed Miles Turner's advice. I've heard him say it all series long. Leave no doubt. And that was the case here this afternoon. An ABC game, so it was in front of a national massive audience across the country. No excuse for Pacer fans and NBA fans that want to watch a high-level game to tune in. But that's not exactly what they got because the Pacers handled the Knicks early on and put it away quickly. I mean, the fact that the great bounce back from the team's bench is something I want to get into. Halliburton, quick shooting, and he looked okay despite having 3 injuries noted on the injury report. How about the coaching adjustment, both in game 3 defensively and now in game 4? Miles Turner continuing to step up. And what does this series look like the rest of the way? It's now 2-2. Both teams just held court. It's, Knicks won the first 2. Pacers handled the last 2. But I think this last game is very interesting because is it more representational of the way this series is headed? Mostly because of health. The Pacers absolutely have benefited from that in the first round with Milwaukee, with Dame, with Giannis, and in this series, of course, with several injuries to notable Knicks players from Julius Randle, Bojan Bogdanovic, Mitchell Robinson, now OG Anunoby. And this Knicks team is not the same without OG Anunoby out there. I included it in my At the Buzzer column, the great stat. 13-16 are the Knicks this season with OG Anunoby not available. So that's a significant impact. And remember, he suffered a hamstring strain, and Knicks are notorious, not very descriptive. Didn't say whether it was, grade 1 or grade 2 or anything like that. But we saw Tyrese miss 10 games. I mean, generally, an injury like OG just had keeps you out 3 to 4 weeks is what you kind of expect. Hamstrings are so tricky. But OG did come with the Knicks to Indiana, mostly because that allows him to be with the medical team, which is absolutely important. Otherwise, you want to be with your guys, right? And so I thought that was notable and important because also if he had no chance of maybe playing the rest of the series, he'd probably just hang back, maybe have his own rehab guy. And those sorts of things as well. So it does suggest to me that he has a chance to return, but it does seem like a slim chance. And on top of that, it seems like even if he did return, he probably would be limited both in terms of minutes and the level of contribution that he would be able to have. Appreciate those joining in here with our live post-game show. It's weird having an earlier show, right? This 3:30 in the afternoon. I'm on the air here going live before even 7 p.m. after this Pacers win. Their 22nd sellout of the season, by the way. 17,274. And the Pacers continue to handle their business at home. I think that's one of the more impressive things. It shouldn't be surprising. That's what good postseason teams do. They win at home. Simple as that. No excuses. And the Pacers have done just that, but not just in the postseason. They won their final 5 games going into the playoffs. Last home loss at Gainbridge Fieldhouse was back on March 18th against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Otherwise, they've won 5 in a row in terms of the playoffs and 10 in a row going all the way back to March. And so that's basically 2 months. That's remarkable. So good job by the Pacers, certainly on that front. I do want to touch on the bench because I thought that was really important what they were able to do, especially considering what they were unable to do in game 3, and that was contribute, have a key role, produce some points, hold their own. It was really in game 3 when the bench came in where the Knicks took over and had their way, but that was not the case in this one at all. The Pacers bench had 17 points in the first quarter. That was more than the 14 they scored in game 3, all of it. And it was more than the Knicks had as a team at the end of the first quarter. They had 14, a tremendous and quite frankly, a surprising first quarter, given what we had seen over the 83-game season for the Pacers during the regular season. First quarter, usually not their best. They usually get off to slow starts. They typically fall behind by double digits. They probably trail at the end of the first quarter more often than not. And in this one, not only did they lead, but they had piled up a 20-point win, or 20-point difference there just after the first quarter. And your mind might immediately go to what they did offensively and the success they had there. And yes, that's absolutely true, because in that first quarter, they shot 61%, but I'd prefer to go to the defensive side, because that's where you set the tone. The physicality by Aaron Nesmith, I will say I thought some of the physicality probably could have been called a foul. And how about Rick Carlisle, since making that pointed message and statement to the league that cost him $35,000? That's easy money for a guy making $7.5 million, right? Because they're now 2-0. They've got a fair whistle, generally speaking. There's been things they don't like, things the Knicks don't like, but it feels like there haven't been any monster decisions or kickballs that didn't make sense or anything like that. And by the way, I had a league source with access to special data and video look back at Game 3, the camera of Miles Turner's chase down block on Josh Hart, and that individual told me it was clean. Basically, the Hawkeye cameras confirm that. So that's notable, because I think it was a bang-bang play that you had to be content with whatever the call was on the floor. There was not enough shown in the ESPN broadcast then to kind of overturn it, block, goaltending or not, or block. But that was a tremendous play by Miles Turner. Then he had 2 blocks in the first 4 minutes in this one. The defense was spectacular. In the first quarter alone, the Knicks shot 26%. They were 1 of 8 from three-point land, had 3 turnovers. They were overwhelmed. The Pacers were swarming them. They were picking up full court. Both Aaron Nesmith and TJ McConnell were disruptive, in particular. 94 feet with Jalen Brunson, making everything difficult. Very similar to what Tyrese Halliburton's getting. Very similar to what Caitlin Clark's expecting with the Fever in terms of pressure and multiple defenders and those sorts of things. So again, good response, I think, from the Pacers defensively and keeping the Knicks tonight to 89 points. Now, I'm not surprised it was a Pacers win, and I'm not surprised it was a Pacers blowout win because of the turnaround. From wanting a good game here today, you really wanted these two teams to have another day in between, just because of the physicality of this series, the minutes being played by some of these guys. And for the Knicks, I mean, they have several players already out of the lineup, right? So it was just a 36-hour turnaround from Game 3 to Game 4. Teams didn't practice. It was all about rest, recovery, and treatment over the last 24 hours to get ready for this Sunday matinee game, which is different, a different feel, certainly at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, because they don't really have many of those, unlike a team like the Lakers, right? That's used to that. They're nothing better, I think, than a Lakers home game in their white uniforms on a Sunday. All right, let's get to some of the questions before I come back and offer more of my thoughts about a variety of things that went on, because there's still plenty I want to get to here on my live post-game show. Appreciate everyone jumping on here. And by the way, Game 5 Tuesday, 8 p.m. TNT. If you're a Caitlin Clark Fever fan, that's going to cause some chaos a little bit. Better have 2 screens. Her debut at Connecticut. That's where I will be Tuesday night. And for that game, that's at 7:30 ESPN2 or Disney Plus, ESPN Plus. Pacers at 8 on TNT. To the questions we go. Jeremy says, great game. I've been wanting to know, though, why have the Pacers not changed up their uniforms once during the playoffs? I don't have the specific answer to you. It's not for a lack of effort. I've sent out a couple messages to the team. They don't want to reply to it. They do not want to share that. I don't understand, because they are all in on this gold theme. Now, to be specific, their jerseys I don't like, because it's a yellow shade. It's not gold. They're yellow uniforms. Even Mark Boyle acknowledges that. But the gold T-shirts, gold towels today. I'm not a towel guy. I don't get why we give away towels anymore. Let's replace that either with T-shirts or something else. Game 4 was towels, though, by the way. My general thought, knowing Tyrese and knowing this team, is they want to buy into that concept. They like the look and feel of the Fieldhouse when it's all gold. And there's something with routine and being out there in the same uniforms and going at it. So, yeah, you're right. All 10 postseason games this season, the Pacers have been in their yellow statement edition uniforms rather than mixing it up I would not expect to see the city court. I was told at the beginning of the playoffs, city court, city uniforms, that has been done. They are all in on these yellow uniforms. I hope to get an answer, a more specific answer for you, Jeremy. I think it's a great story. And it's marketing. I don't know why the team wouldn't want to tell that, but they have been strangely mum about that whole thing. MK Sinks, 10 for 10. Good to see you, pal, here on the postgame show. They say, what an absolute beatdown today. Love that the Pacers did not ease up in the second half. Yeah, that's again speaks to this team's maturity. I mentioned this on my At the Buzzer column over at fieldhousefiles.com. How often this season have we talked about this team shrinking in the big moments, shrinking in the big game, not having the maturity to hold a big lead or rise up to meet their level of opponent? I thought they did all the positives on that side here in this one. They met the moment. They came out strong. They stepped on the throats of the Knicks and kept it that way. It didn't ease up. The game was not it was not in doubt after the first quarter at all. You saw the Knicks make like a couple mini runs, but nothing threatening, nothing that really had you concerned. And a lot of that also is due to personnel. And again, defense. Jalen Brunson, 6 of 17, 18 points. He was the only Knicks starter in double figures. And yes, I get part of that's a minute allotment, but DiVincenzo, 3 for 13 in 32 minutes, just 7 points. You keep those two a combined 25 points, you're going to win the series. You're going to win the game. No doubt about that. A defense and pressure and physicality, things that we are not known for knowing this Pacers team. They are not a defensive team. If they're average, that's plenty good enough. And tonight they were much better than average. They brought the fight. They wanted this one badly. And I think it was so critical because you go into New York, and if you don't win this one, not only do you feel the pressure of having to stay alive, but you would have to win 2 of the final 3 game. You would have to win out, basically. Yeah, you would have to win out to win the series. And I just don't see that happening for a young, inexperienced team like this. They would make some kind of mistake. Something would go against them, shots or fouls, something like that. Now it becomes a best of 3 series. Both teams just looking to win 2 games, and that's all they need to move on to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they will likely face the Boston Celtics, who, pending health, I don't see any team beating them in the East. I said that from the very beginning of the season. They are in a class of their own. Thanks for the question there, MK Sinks. Welcome, Mark. He says, how can the Pacers stay humble, stay focused, and understand this only counts as one, and actually the next game is the most important? New York will come back punching in MSG with a huge crowd. I totally agree with that last point because the crowd has been fantastic. Been watching the private feed of kind of MSG and the Gamebridge Fieldhouse and what things look like. It's phenomenal. Just the environments that both arenas have had. And I did like the fact that VP of Game Operations, Dean Haviland, did something different today. He very much resembled what they do at MSG, and that's at least in the first half, because after a while you run out of dignitaries, celebrities, whatever, is during each time out, they would highlight 1 or 2 of the VIPs sitting courtside. It was Dale Davis who revved it up. It was John Mellencamp. It was several IndyCar drivers, Scott Dixon, Dario Franchitti, as well as Marcus Erickson, although Erickson didn't get shown up there, but he was at the game I saw, that were sitting courtside. Then later on to start the fourth quarter, game well in hand, starters on the bench, but still electric. They gave the mic to Pat McAfee, who notably has had some discourse with the Pacers organization over the last several years. That's why you haven't seen him in a lot of games. He's talked about it on his show. I believe he's only been at one other Pacer game this season, and that was not for the Pacers. It was as a guest with Utah Jazz owner Ryan Smith. So it was not only notable that he was there, but maybe he put that beef with whomever that was with behind him, because he even talked with this when Tyrese was on the show back in early February during the All-Star break. And Tyrese, being a good leader like he is, he goes, hey, how can I squash that? We need you back. How can we get you there? And I thought that was pretty cool. And then to see the number of individuals that came out. I think Colts had maybe mini camp today, perhaps, but at the other game, there were several Colts, including previous Colt, Edgerrin James, a Hall of Famer. So that was pretty cool as well. But the question, Mark, how do they stay humble and all of that? I think it's guys like Miles Turner, Pascal Siakam, TJ McConnell, and probably James Johnson speaking up and saying, hey, look, we haven't done shit yet. We just did what we were supposed to do. The blowout, it doesn't matter if we won by 3. It doesn't matter if we won by 30 points. It all counts the same. That's what you really have to emphasize, I think, if you are the Pacers here. And I think they all know that. I think it all would hit home. Um, so you don't have to emphasize it too much. In fact, I don't think you want to a ton just because you feel the stakes a little bit more. You'd feel the pressure a little bit more, perhaps because of that. But it's definitely a message I think the coaching staff and maybe leaders on this team make a couple times, maybe once tomorrow and then once pregame while in New York. But it's absolutely something that you have to be concerned about given the lack of experience and big game experience for much of this roster, Mark. Just Be You, welcome back. He says, do you think Jalen Smith accepts his player option now? Hot start to the season, but back injury hurt his potential, etc. Hard to say right now. Certainly has hurt his value, I think, presumably. The fact that Isaiah Jackson's playing over him, Isaiah Jackson's on another he has one more year on his rookie contract, which is notable. But it's hard to have a clear indication on that just yet until after the draft and after the season where both sides have a feel for each other. For example, there's been times in the exit interviews where the front office will go in. This happened with O'Shea Brissett this past year and basically said, "Hey, we're probably going to go in a different direction. We loved having you on the team, but we're going to go a different way. This partnership kind of thing is over." So while it wasn't official, but it was last April, O'Shea knew, all right, I'm not being brought back despite being a solid contributor, hard worker, one of the X factor type guys off the bench and being close with Tyrese Halliburton. He knew he would not need to find a new landing spot. Now, the question I'd want to ask Jalen, number one, is what do you think about the team's belief in you and Rick Carlisle's in particular? Because that was the number one reason he re-signed with the Pacers on a 3-year deal. This is year 2. He has that player option for year 3, but as I reported at Fieldhouse Files, he turned down a couple larger offers so he could stay here where he thrived, where remember he was promised a starting role. Things have changed quite a bit for him, right? Since 2 years ago where he began the season as a starter. That lasted about 20 games. Then he came off the bench, didn't shoot it as well. But you also see the maturity in a player. And if you get to the Eastern Conference Finals or certainly the second round, that's got to be appealing versus going to a lottery team and having more of a role generally. Although some players might want more of a role, be able to have more of a contribution and those sorts of things. So those are things, if you're a player, you're probably putting out of your mind right now. That's the last thing you want to think about, because if you're thinking about that, you're not thinking about how you can help this team while you're out there. So I will be very curious to see how and hear how Jalen Smith is feeling about himself in this situation, but not until after the season. Excuse me. Flamethrower says, I was wrong. No controversy in this game. Pacers punked the Knicks. Yep, as simple as that. No doubt. The yellow jerseys are my favorite. The regular home and away are so generic. Yeah, I agree with that. In terms of the genericness of the home and away, but I don't like the yellow jerseys. It's the wrong shade. I like the gold pinstripe. If you want to compare it to something, I think that's more what I like. Even this is more gold than yellow. This backdrop, by the way, and it's the blue and gold. So I like the idea of the statement uniforms, but they are not my favorite. I had someone on Twitter ask about the Hickory uniforms this weekend. That was a first because we haven't talked about those in probably 4 years. Remember that 5-year contract with MGM and Pacers and their marketing that expired, and so they moved on from those classic edition uniforms. Again, Pacers win today, 121-89. Series is tied at 2 apiece. Game 5 coming up on Tuesday, and then Game 6 will not be until Friday, not Thursday, but Friday, and that's because of the Fever. The Indiana Fever have their home opener on Thursday against the New York Liberty. So how about that? Pacers will play at New York on Tuesday, Fever versus New York on Thursday, Pacers versus New York on Friday. So that's a fun series within a series. I don't know. Internal battle. Although I should note, by the way, the Liberty are owned by Joe Tsai, and who's the Brooklyn Nets owner, not James Dolan, who's the Knicks owner. Quentin, I think this is your first time here on the postgame show. Appreciate you joining in here. Do the Pacers have a better chance with 1 day recovery at MSG or 2 days rest at Gamebridge? The quick thought is the 1 day, just because they have the depth and the Knicks do not. I think in general, though, the Pacers have everything in their favor right now with OG being out. Mitchell Robinson being out. Those two were not out when this series started. So 2 more players gone down that would absolutely be in the rotation. Pascal Siakam today, 14 points, 7 of 9 shooting, didn't need a 3-point attempt, didn't even get to the free throw line because he didn't need it. He was so productive inside the arc, and a lot of that is because OG is out. Now, in game 1, I thought he got the upper hand. He did get the upper hand of OG, but I thought OG had a better response, and they're in game 2. And that was the matchup I was really looking forward to for a number of reasons, but mostly because of their ties to the Toronto Raptors. And now you have Precious Achiuwa, who's replaced OG in the starting lineup, but he's not a threat offensively, although ironically 7 or 8 points on 4-7 shooting, but he's a guy that you can really sag off of. I talked on my podcast with Fred Katz about that, and he brought up the idea of playing a defender as kind of a free safety on Achiuwa, so then they can help out elsewhere. And I saw Caitlin Cooper note on Twitter that that's what the Pacers did for a little bit, at least of the game, with Obi Toppin as kind of a roamer free safety. So that I'm glad that came to fruition after we talked about that on the podcast here with Fred Katz a couple of days ago. You can still listen. A lot of that is still relevant of this series, as is my series preview with Steve Popper, another Knicks beat writer from last week. By the way, I can't believe I've gotten 21 minutes into this and I haven't wished some of the guests here and everyone a happy Mother's Day. I hope things went well for you. I celebrated yesterday just because today ultimately is a work day. I know most people have the day off. Us in sports, we do not, and that's just fine. We know what we get into. Back to the questions here after the Pacers' 32-point win. But to answer your question, Quentin, yeah, 1-day recovery definitely favors the Pacers because it means one less opportunity for those Knicks. Roaming Gnome says, thanks again for making the trip back to Fort Wayne pleasant. Hey, there you are. Absolutely. I remember you, I think at least from game 1, maybe. That's incredible, though. Driving 2+ hours from Fort Wayne to attend a game like this, and I know it's not cheap. I was surprised, actually, at the price of tickets, just because I'd never really have to buy tickets, and except for concerts. I do pay those, but for games. And, I mean, I saw seats that were all right in the corner. I think row 9, $466 each plus Ticketmaster fees and taxes. Unreal. Balcony, though, you could get in for about $90 for fees. So that's about $100 per ticket. Maybe you're willing to do that to sit in the upper 10,000 seats, but a tremendous atmosphere, no doubt, today at Gamebridge Fieldhouse. And happy to make your drive a little more enjoyable, Roaming Gnome. Brian says, I was impressed with how everyone crashed the boards. I hope this continues in game 5. That's been the overlying theme of the season, right? Whoever wins the boards generally wins the game. Tonight, no exception. 43 rebounds for the Pacers, 27 for the Knicks. Now, the Knicks did have 16 offensive rebounds, which led to 12 second chance points. But the Pacers had their best game on the run in fast break points. They had more fast break points early on with 9. When the Knicks had just 8 points. The Pacers had more points in the paint easily. Pacers had more points from beyond the arc, doubled up what the Knicks did there. So they were plus 21. This is a game where the Pacers basically won all facets of the game and left, no doubt, one tie, one lead change. You do not see that very often in the postseason. Usually games are a lot closer, especially with the way games are called right now, where they're more physical, and you're allowing that physicality. You're having the lower scored games. But if you told me before the Pacers score 121 points, by the way, you'd think it was a win. It was not in the first couple of games. Those were high-scoring games, which favors the Pacers. But ultimately, it was the Knicks coming out on top. What else do we got here? A lot of great comments here on our post-game show. Drew says, do we expect the whistle to stay lopsided in MSG? Well, right now, so far, so good for the Pacers in that department, right? I don't think anything dramatic went against them. Some might point to, I forget who it was. Was it Brunson? I don't think it was Brunson on Halliburton. Got struck on an elbow. That he got struck, but he was kind of in his path. I think it was Achiuwa, actually, by the way, if I remember that correctly. The block charges, sometimes become a thing. And then there was that challenge that was unsuccessful. And I get that because one of the replays on ABC clearly showed that I think Nembhard swiped Brunson across the face. It was a little small, it was quick, but he definitely made contact. I didn't like that challenge either because I think it was Nembhard wasn't in foul trouble and it was early in the first quarter. The argument against that is you don't want to give the New York Knicks any life. And on top of that, Brunson went to the line. He's almost automatic at the free throw line. So that was worth 2 points in the Pacers' mind before they challenged it. Now, Brunson ultimately went 6 of 9 from the free throw line. Hasn't done nearly as well at the stripe in the last couple of games. I think leaving 3 at the line the last couple after starting the series 14 for 14 in game 1. What else we got? Logan on here says, as a Pacer fan, this is all you can ask for. Great. Feels great to be relevant again. The commentators were below great. I couldn't mute my TV because the crowd was just too great. I go back and forth there. First of all, I thought it was a great announcing crew, especially with Mike Breen. I think he's the best play-by-player right now in the NBA. So I am excited for that, mostly because the Pacers do not get him on the call of many games. I bet this is probably the third time. I'm thinking back the in-season tournament, one game, and then these 2 in a row. Now, game 5 will be on TNT. I haven't heard yet, but I'm guessing depending on the Minnesota schedule that Reggie will try to get back for that one. I have not looked what the Minnesota-Denver schedule is doing. Maybe MK Sinks can let me know here. He's usually ahead of doing multitasking while we're on here. But do I expect a similar whistle? I don't know why not. I think there will be a couple things that go against them because there almost always is, especially when you're on the road. You got to deal with it. I thought Brunson, the Pacers were benefited from being overly physical. And so that was to their benefit. But yeah, I agree, Logan. In terms of the Pacers being relevant again, that's where they've needed to be. I noted at the top of my column tonight after the game. You know what else was tonight? Normally, I'm in Chicago right now for the NBA Draft Combine. That's when you're not talking about games. That's when you're holding on something right here called hope because you don't have anything, because you didn't make the playoffs, because you're a lottery team. And the Pacers were a lottery team each of the last 3 years, but not this year because they won enough games and they're on that trajectory up. You re-sign Pascal this offseason, and notably, why they've been on that trajectory up is because of trades. It certainly hasn't been because of draft picks. Now, Benedict Mathurin's one exception because he's been tremendous. You would also include Andrew Nembhard, a second-round pick. But I did think it's notable, while the draft lottery was basically the pregame show for today's game 4, that triggered something in my mind to think, hey, look, the Pacers are on this run in the second round, just 2 wins away from the Eastern Conference Finals. It'd be their first time in 2 years or 10 years, and they're doing it without their lottery pick in each of the last 3 years. Chris Duarte, they traded in the offseason to Sacramento. Mathurin's hurt, and I'm not sure exactly what's going on with Jarus Walker right now, other than the Pacers just feel he is too raw and not ready, because even Kendall Brown got in before him in this blowout. Now, Jarus did get in there. You saw some slippage. You saw him gambling a little bit, reaching for the ball. Saw him take a fade, leaning back on his shot. That's one thing he's got to correct is working on that shot, especially in the mid-range, is when he fades back, almost always misses. But today he was 2 of 4 and was able to play 9 minutes of a fourth quarter in a playoff game. Invaluable, especially just the stakes and the experience that you have with that. It's also a nice experience in general for him in terms of being on national TV and friends and family watching and all of that. But you would expect more from your lottery pick, like they drafted him basically at 7. But he hadn't had much of a role this season at all. Was drafted before they had a power forward, then they added a couple, mostly Pascal Siakam in season. But that said, you would have hoped for a little bit more of a role, no doubt, this season from Jarus Walker. How did I get involved in that? Oh, being relevant again. That was the question from Logan. Granny Danger. Nothing better than May with Pacers playing as well, along with obviously the Indy 500. You're absolutely right. Normally, I'm already out at the Indy 500 covering some of that and maybe a Fever player or a Pacers executive or a Pacers player out there. But no time for that right now because both Pacers and Fever, exciting, relevant, and winning here. What else we got here? Mark says, what do you think about Jarus in the fourth quarter? Oh, I kind of answered that previously without even seeing your question there. I think the development was a little bit behind what you had hoped. Going into this season, Rick Carlisle even prefaced it because I even asked Rick, I think it was like 2 days before the start of the season. I go, are you expecting kind of a similar trajectory with Mathurin in terms of, you don't want to start him right away? And remember, Siakam wasn't here yet. But you had Obi Toppin or you started Jalen Smith as well for a time. And he was like, no, this is an entirely different situation in terms of Jarus, which obviously clearly was. Mathurin was ready right away to contribute in some ways, whereas Jarus didn't. Now, he did benefit from playing in the G League. His three-point shot was much better, gained some confidence there. But the biggest challenge for him was being a star player at Houston, knowing his role, knowing exactly what was called upon him, and then coming here with the Pacers, not playing very much, not knowing what his role was, never knowing if he was even going to get in there. And mentally, that was such a struggle, especially being like a 19-year-old kid in a new city, not knowing anyone. So that was a real mental challenge for Jarus to deal with and try to stay ready. They can say that all they want, but it's not easy whatsoever to stay ready when you're not being called upon. And meanwhile, you think and you see fellow first-round pick Ben Shepherd play quite well and be out there and get more regular time, especially after Mathurin went down late in the season. Chris says Rick is in great position to bring this one home by playing his cards right. The Knicks are wearing down. Knicks needs to push the right buttons to bring home the series, keep pushing the pace. No doubt. And that was going to be the story at the beginning of the series. I thought we saw Rick and the players set the tone early, pressuring full court, making things difficult, trying to match that physicality, but mostly trying to speed the game up, set the tone, and tire these Knicks out. I wrote in my first column about this series, and now others are saying it too, but it's the war of attrition. Who collapses first? Is it the Pacers because of the physicality of these Knicks, or is it the Knicks because they're just tired, bad legs? And now we've seen health has played a tremendous factor in the first two rounds for the Pacers with the Bucks, and then now the Knicks, who are down four key players. Jalen Brunson's struggling a little bit. You could see his frustration from his health come out early on when Aaron Nesmith made a closeout on him on the right wing. That was something he wasn't happy with. And then DiVincenzo, I think he had 32 points in the first three quarters of game three, scored three the rest of the way. Did not look as confident, but mostly just looked gassed. I think he made 6 3-pointers and was having to play nearly every minute. And then again tonight for the second straight game, Josh Hart was pulled earlier in the game, even before they waved the white flag, basically saying, all right, whatever, this game is in hand. And Josh Hart had played 12 straight quarters, I think it is, before being pulled in these playoffs. So he's a guy that's determined and loves playing every single minute, all 48 minutes. But that, again, was not the case tonight, and it wasn't needed either. So, yes, I totally agree, Chris. I like what the coaching staff, maybe Jenny Busick deserves the credit perhaps here, maybe Rick, the defensive assignments. Aaron Nesmith guarding Jalen Brunson, adding length rather than physicality on Brunson the last two games. And then today, early on, we saw Andrew Nembhard defending DiVincenzo, who's kind of been their second best player in the series, rather than Halliburton on DiVincenzo. Halliburton slid off and guarded Josh Hart instead as they kind of flip-flop that matchup. And I thought that worked successfully. Again, DiVincenzo 3 for 13, finishing with 7 points, and Brunson had 18 points on 6 of 17 shooting in Pacers' 121-89 win tonight. Walker was playing point guard, kind of hard to judge him. Yeah, there's a mismatched unit, obviously. No doubt about that. But there's little things you can evaluate. Mostly what I was judging out there in between writing my story and thinking big picture about this is more so how he's looking defensively. Could he hold his own? Could he guard his yard? How is he as a point of attack defender? Was he communicating? Little things like that, because you're right. To your point, Greg, you're not making grand statements or anything big like that, given the circumstances in this and the newness for him being in the postseason. Are TJ and Obi the best alley-oop tandem since CP3 and Blake? I would say Tyrese and Obi. TJ's fantastic with those lobs, but Tyrese is a better passer. Led the league in assists. So I would say that's probably the best tandem since the Clippers duo you referenced. Welcome, Jacob. He says, I'm behind, but maybe the reason they're sticking with the yellow jerseys is a hint at a rebrand. They don't want to showcase what would now be the old jerseys on this stage. Well, if you do a rebrand, you would get new statement uniforms as well. So I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think it's a matter of Tyrese and the Pacers leaders choosing that yellow uniform and to go with that the rest of the way. Consistency, routine, um, predictability. There's value. If you've noticed, I've worn the same hoodie after every single broadcast. I got enough to worry about. There is a great continuity in not having to think about what you're wearing and what pair of shoes, and you can plan that out. Tyrese had a special player special edition Nike pair tonight. So that certainly plays a factor. And then it allows for them to lean into the gold outs, which is something that has worked for this franchise for over a decade here. Remember, what was it? Blue collar gold swagger. A little corny for my taste, but that was what they leaned into, I think, back in 2012, Jacob. But thanks for the comment. Appreciate it. Swear OB does one thing a game that I've never seen on an NBA court. There's not many players that do that either. It all goes back, Granny, to my conversation about who are you willing to pay to go see. To me, there are a handful of players that are absolutely worth the price of admission. And usually you go back, this is what a buddy taught me, and I completely agree. It all goes back to, are you going to see something different? Like Caitlin Clark plays different. LeBron, there's nobody like him. Steph Curry, nobody like him. I would include Luka in there. I would include Wemby. That's about 4 players, maybe a Kyrie in there. I don't know. But that's probably the list of players that are absolutely worth the price of admission. And Obi, I mean, you can't say that as much about him because you don't know what his role, how many minutes he might play tonight. 19 minutes, 14 points, a couple of rebounds, a block shot. This has got to be so much fun for him, not only going against his brother, Jacob, who's, I think, on a 2-way, by the way. So it's not like he's playing minutes, getting minutes out there. But for his mom to be there on Mother's Day, able to see both kids, like that's just awesome. I don't care if they play or not. So I'm happy for that family. And Toppin's been tremendous since he got here, both of how he's been a professional, how he's adapted when his role has changed, and more specifically minimized from starter to the bench, and now kind of being depended on with TJ McConnell and Ben Shepherd. And actually, Isaiah Jackson's given them some good minutes as well in this series off the bench. They take great pride in what they are able to do. It was not there in game 3. Absolutely was there here in game 4. What else we got here? Championship gold jerseys. There you go, Greg. Sure. Just Be You says, is there a difference in material between the jerseys? Also, how weird is it the Pacers tie up the series and all we want to mention is choice of jerseys? Oh, I'm mentioning a lot of different things, Just Be You. But it's newsworthy, it's noteworthy, it's details in the different things. And one of those things is the fact that the Pacers have been wearing the same uniforms in every single game. I'm happy to talk about Neesmith's defense or Halliburton's health and how he's overcome a lot of that. All of those are very interesting to me. I can go a variety of ways with all that. But the number one thing for me tonight in this Pacers win was their attitude, maturity, disposition, to use Rick Carlisle's word, and their defense, keeping the Knicks to 34%. You're going to win every game when you keep a team to 34%. That's just numbers because you're not going to shoot nearly as bad. So well done by the Pacers. A good start, held them off, added to their lead, pushed it to 43, got stops, got them to basically quit, wave the white flag, and move on to game 5, which was the right call by the Knicks, especially given the timeline and not really one full, or I guess you do have one full day in between because they're going to, with the 3:30 game, they're probably landing in New York right about now. I could check their flight, but they're going to get back here early this evening, all about rest and recovery and such going into Tuesday's game. That is at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Anything else defensive you noticed that the Pacers did different, or do you think it came down to the Knicks fatigue? I think first thing was Knicks fatigue. I thought the Pacers pressured up more, which has kind of been an ongoing theme in all this. And I think the just activity level is what I go back to. Miles Turner with 2 swats in like the first 4 minutes. That's just frustrating if you're on the other side of that, especially when it happens time and time again, because as a player, you just want to see shots go down. You want some positive reinforcement that what you're doing could work. And the Pacers have zapped that. Miles zapped that, both with his block of Josh Hart, his chase down in game 3, and then early on in this one. Meanwhile, Tyrese, who was on their injury report with 3 different injuries, that low back, his ankle, and what else? There was something else in there, not the hamstring. But anyways, he had two threes in the first 317, I think it was. That's an encouraging start. So all those different things. And to the point of Just Be You earlier, those are the many things you can talk about that came away from this Pacers win. I am curious. I'm guessing you fans out there loved this game, loved everything about it, that you could sit back if you were at the game, maybe have a beer and just relax. Just as a basketball fan and the one covering this, the, the blowouts are not fun because you don't have the storylines. You don't have the comeback. You don't have the game-changing play. You don't have that game-winning three from Nembhard. That's what, if you wonder what we root for, it's not for the teams. It's for the story. It's for something significant. And so, again, in this one, it's the defense, the physicality, Pacers holding their own. But it's nothing like writing off of, say, Andrew Nembhard making that game-winning shot and Tyrese talking about how it was a bad pass and Andrew bailed him out. And all those different things. Nesmith's defense and how that's been a key factor in the Pacers' 2 wins and all those different things. Let's see here. Scott, what's good, bro? We got this thingamajig tied up. Yep, that's true. The sides too spicy for Caitlin. The sides. Oh, I got you. Christy Sides, head coach. There you go. You're all about the puns, huh? Nesmith's a beast. I totally agree, Greg. What he's doing is incredible. And the fact that his contract was expiring and before the season, the Pacers extended his deal, added 3 years at 11 per. Fantastic contract, especially given where the salary cap is going to go, how it's going to spike. They're going to have more money to deal with. And you got Tyrese on a max deal. You got Pascal coming probably to a max deal coming up. And so all those different things, the fact that you can right now have a starter. I think best case scenario is if Nesmith can either develop even more or be like your 6th man. Man, you have quite a unit there. I think moving forward, ideally, you'd want Nembhard be your backup point guard for the next foreseeable future and come off the bench as well. If you could strengthen that starting lineup even more, that would then trickle down and strengthen the bench even more, which would be fantastic. The team still really needs to go out and get a 3-and-D guy. That's what every team really prioritizes, but the Pacers, I think, have to this offseason. A guy that can be more of a defensive stopper, that you can entrust more on slowing guys like Brunson and like DiVincenzo. RC Fresh again says, Pacers have the Knicks right where they want them. They beat them up, injured, and tired. No doubt. Yep, and you're not going to complain or apologize for those circumstances. You're just going to go try to take care of your business. Now, as someone watching the series, I want to see both teams at full strength. I want to see Mathurin out there. I want to see Julius Randle out there. But I know if you're a Pacer fan, you just want to kick their ass and move on to the Eastern Conference Finals, something that I guarantee you no Pacer fan or Pacer expected this season. The goal was to get to the playoffs. The goal was to go have fun and experience what the playoffs were like for the first time. They've done that and then some, because of health, because of their ever-evolving maturity and their growth, and so many different things going on. By the way, I should shout out Lloyd Pierce, the Pacers' lead assistant coach, celebrated his birthday, as did Kendall Brown here over the weekend. MK Sinks, did you see the draft lottery? Anything noteworthy as far as to impact the Pacers? I did see it. I did see the results. And the most notable thing was the odds and how things change things up quite a bit here. I mean, the fact that Atlanta won, they made a leap. Washington second, Houston getting their pick from the Nets in third. San Antonio leaped up. They're in fourth. How about Detroit having the worst record, their worst series in franchise history, and they dropped to their worst possible spot in fifth. They're obviously in the Central Division, so that is notable. Charlotte dropped to sixth. Otherwise, Chicago is in 11th. That's notable for the Central Division. But otherwise, the biggest story, I would say, from what happened with the draft lottery over in Chicago today was, one, they moved it up. Like, it's weird that it was on a Sunday. It really didn't get much attention. Normally, it's kind of on a Tuesday, and it's during the Eastern Conference Finals. And Malika Andrews and a lead ESPN crew is there. That was not the case today. But Atlanta is on the clock with the number one pick. And you talk to people, and no one really knows exactly who's going to be number one. It's not a great draft, and that's exactly why what the Pacers were able to do is send out some first-round picks, including their own this year for Pascal Siakam, a known commodity. You know exactly what you're getting from him. Playoff experience, a champion. That's why that was such a good deal, as long as there's that understanding that you would be able to re-sign him this offseason. Now, if he leaves this summer, obviously that's tough. And I think as the Pacers progress more and more in this postseason, that can only help your case, right? As long as you be on the same page in terms of money and in terms of years. It was Mother's Day. I only got to see bits and pieces of the game. However, the blowout was amazing. Yeah, I figured that you and other Pacer fans would feel that way. Probably allowed you to watch the first half, go have a Bloody Mary or a beer, and celebrate Mother's Day as you should without having to be glued to the game unless you were at the game. Ryan says, do you think the Pacers can win one on the road? That's the main thing here that has me concerned. They were only able to win one in round one against the Bucks. I think so because of the situation. It's all circumstantial here. The Pacers absolutely should have taken one of game one or game two, right? They cost themselves or the officials and them cost themselves in game one. There were several things they could have handled better in game two as well. The first three games were all tight. Could have gone either way. So that doesn't give me any pause in thinking the Pacers don't have a shot or are under or overwhelming underdogs in those at all. The number one reason being, given throwing out the guys that were already out of the series, is OG Anunoby's health. I'm not sure there's great optimism that he will be back for game five. And even if he is, what's he going to look like with a bum ankle? I mean, he burned a tire or, flattened a tire out there. Did not look good. Immediately came to a stop, headed to the locker room, went immediately back, and just did not look like himself at all. So I thought that was interesting, but disappointing because I want a healthy OG out there to make this series much more interesting. So, yes, to your point, by the way, Ryan, yeah, I think the Pacers absolutely can win one on the road. If they play like today in terms of not even how well they shot it, they're not going to have to shoot 57% from the field or jump out to a 20-point lead in the first quarter. But if they play with that level of aggression, if they play with that level of defense, if they make Jalen Brunson and DiVincenzo and others that uncomfortable, yeah, no doubt they can come away and get one win on the road and then potentially come back here on Friday and close it out in game 6. That's the best case scenario if you're the Pacers, is you'd win these 4 in a row and be done with the Knicks, not even need a game 7. Because, yes, as always, pending health. But if you have a game 7 at MSG, that's tough because of circumstances, man. I don't think the Pacers want to get to that point whatsoever. Just be you again. Nesmith has the potential to be all defense in the future. He's stopped playing with his hands and is using physical tools. Yeah, he's bodied up more in a good way. He does use his hands in a good way a lot. And if you've watched Rick throughout much of the regular season, how many times would you see Rick just play with his hands to remind everyone, hey, put your hands up, hands down, man down, like stop doing that. Nesmith's got better at that. I think he's just physical. He owns the matchup. He very much reminds me of Paul George coming in, who found a niche early on when he was out of the rotation and didn't have a spot. That was him in Boston. Comes to Indiana and was thought of as a throw-in to the Malcolm Brogdon trade that also brought the Pacers a first-round pick. And now he's started the majority of the season. He's been one of the Pacers' best defenders, and now he'll be with the team for the foreseeable future with a new contract. So I completely agree with you on that front. Nesmith's done a nice job of rising to the challenge. And think about Nembhard. He played 4 years at Gonzaga, 4 years in college, 2 at Florida, 2 at Gonzaga. But much like Ben Shepherd, he's got that experience. And you hope Ben Shepherd can become that two-way guy as well. He comes in, knocks down a couple threes in most games. Today, just 1 of 5. But does that, plays tough defensively, is not a liability, knows exactly what the team wants from him with a high IQ after being a 4-year player at Belmont. That's another guy that the Pacers can be encouraging about when you're thinking about the future. Yeah, that's right, Frank. The injury was the tailbone. And you were talking about Tyrese Halliburton when I was a while ago. He tweaked his ankle, and then he's dealing with that tailbone as well. Jack, welcome. Happy to have Knicks fans on here as well as Pacers, as long as keep the conversation honest, fair, and not get belligerent or anything like that. I love including fans of both sides. No doubt about that. I enjoy it. I enjoy the discourse. Greg says if the Pacers could acquire a 6'9" two-way wing, Nesmith could make a nice starting shooting guard. You know what I'd like about that is it would be a huge upgrade in size. And that's this thing that the Pacers have struggled with, is not having size on the wing in particular. They've had size up front. They don't have bulk up front, but you really need some size on the wing, and that's one thing that would allow them to do that. You're right, Greg. Jack said, "Great stomp out by the Pacers. Y'all look like y'all had your butts." All right, I'm gonna move on there. I don't know what you're getting at there, bub. Greg says Jarus Walker is the guy. Hopefully, could be, no doubt. I mean, it takes 3 years really to Donnie Walsh taught me this. You really have to give it at least 3 years to understand what you have in a draft pick. We're seeing more and more from Isaiah Jackson, for example, right now. This is year 3 from him. So that's encouraging. A guy that was not asked to do a lot during the regular season outside of when Jalen Smith or Miles was injured ahead of him or missed time. Now in the postseason, today he played more minutes just because of the gap in score, but 19 minutes for him. Defense, rebounding, rim protection, that's what they're wanting from him. Jalen, a different player, much more on the perimeter, a knockdown three-pointer type. Jack City says Knicks in 6 or 7. Okay. They're going to need to get healthy and get more comfortable out there. I could see it happening, but man, I don't like where they're at right now, just in terms of health. And when this is where, depending on a core group for so many minutes, is it sustainable throughout a playoff, not just series, but a postseason run? That's what's challenging here. Just BU conspiracy theory says Atlanta got the first pick to try to keep Trae Young there. I don't believe in those conspiracy theories. Too many people would have to be in on them. I think someone was asking about conspiracies after game 1 with the officiating. I don't get into that. I would be surprised if Trae Young is still there. I could see DeJounte Murray moved on there. Maybe not. Probably more likely than not, one of them is still in Atlanta. But Quinn Snyder had a disappointing season for me in Atlanta this year. Their defense was atrocious, even worse than the Pacers. And I thought he'd have a better season than they did this year. They definitely need to remake that roster. Jack says, I'm here to congratulate the Pacers. Mark says, hello, Pants fan. Knicks fan, I'm sure. Steve says, what was the real Pacers, or did ESPN shoehorn the AI team? We've been hoaxed. I got you. I think the real Pacers is a combination of what we've seen today with what we've seen the rest of the series. I thought they exceeded all expectations for performance today. Everything kind of went their way, and they controlled those controllables. They kept their turnovers down, shot at 57% from the field. Knicks were exhausted. They didn't make shots, so just 34%. Everything went the Pacers' way tonight. I'm not sure that is sustainable, and to repeat that game after game at all. Mark says, I appreciate the effort. Pacers in 6. Very well could be, mostly because of the lack of depth now for the Knicks. I would love to see the Knicks out there with Julius Randle, with Bogey, with OG Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson, but that's just not the case. And so I thought the Knicks, with that, if a healthy group of that went into Boston, they would make things interesting, but Boston would still win in the conference finals. Right now, it's hard to go against the Pacers based on how they've played, what we've seen, their current health, that Halliburton hadn't been too down despite his awful performance in game 1, 6 points on 6 shots. If he replicated that and continued on, you wouldn't feel good about it. But after what he's done the last several games, he had back-to-back 30-point games. Tonight, 20 points in 28 minutes, no turnovers, six rebounds, 5 assists. All those things were encouraging. How he was looking for teammates, how he came off screens, how he won his matchup. Those are all positive and should give Pacer fans encouragement going into Game 5 on Tuesday. All right, a couple more questions here on our Fieldhouse Files live postgame show. This has easily been our top attended one, I think, as Pacer fans. One, probably the earliness helps, that we're not doing this at 11 and midnight because of a late start, but also because I think the excitement in the city. It was a gorgeous day outside. Unfortunately, unable to spend too much time enjoying it between Fever practice and then covering the Pacers game. But I hope some of you maybe were able to enjoy that. Jack says all major commentators usually speak high of other teams as opposed to the Knicks. I'm used to it. I've been hearing this before 2005. Greg says Shep is going to be a long-time fixture. I agree with that. I could totally see him be a Pacer for 12 years, right? Same thing with Aaron Nesmith now moving forward. You can just use those guys. They can be in the league a long time. His three-point shot has been a little waffly. There'll be games where he's 3 for 6 and then others where he's 1 for 6. That I'd like to see more consistency from him. I'd also like to see him offensively have some more consistency in attacking. I mean, a game like today, none of the Pacers starters went to the free throw line. It wasn't needed for how much probably they were knocking down shots here. What else we got? Ethan, thankful for the win, but a bit apprehensive going into Tuesday. Too many times you see a beatdown followed by a complacent performance. Yep, you are clearly a Pacer fan who was watched this season, no doubt. And it kind of goes to the earlier question. I think it was maybe Ryan who asked, how do you keep from being too confident, too complacent? And I think all you got to do is point to what happened during the regular season and the fact that this is an opportunity of a lifetime for so many of these players. Tyrese hadn't been in the postseason his first 3 years. Now he's 2 wins away, 1 road win away from advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals. Would be tremendous, especially given the up and down season he had due to health with the hamstring and now the tailbone and now the tweaked ankle. He's playing through it to his credit. I mean, he was limping off the dais after game 3 a couple nights ago. Much better tonight. That's a credit to the Pacers athletic training staff as well as some of their private physical therapists as well for getting them ready for tonight's game. Because I think Aaron Nesmith has looked the most comfortable that he has in probably a month each of these last 2 games, by the way. Miles looking sharp. He's one that just handles his business. He's never going to have one that rarely has a performance that just jumps out at you just from a box score standpoint. Tonight, for example, 13 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 blocks, a little bit of everything. I still go back. He made one of the biggest plays in the series in game 3 with that block of Josh Hart with 2:03 left in that game. GH Sen says, what health? Knicks up 2-0. Nobody talked about health. Brunson looks okay. Just got locked up by Mac. I'm not sure who's Mac. But health, I've been talking all about the Knicks' health. Go back to my first column going into this series, the war of attrition. Would the minutes catch up with these Knicks? And already they had Julius Randle and Bogey out, Mitchell Robinson out after game 1. We've been talking about health this whole series. I don't know where you've been. Just be you, hear me out, but I really think the Knicks should move on from Randle. I guess he's an all-star, but his attitude and fit next to Brunson leaves a lot to be desired. All right, well, who are you going to go get? Much like firing a coach, I always want to answer that question before I solve the other one. For example, while I don't like Phoenix firing Frank Vogel, I don't think it's going to do that big of boost or help whatsoever. I did like the fact that they very much clearly had narrowed down their list and had Mike Budenholzer targeted and damn near hired for a day or 2 after Frank Vogel was fired. That is good business to already have your guy in place before you fired him. Still, don't think you fire Frank, but whatever. He didn't even have his assistant coaches that he wanted. Wasn't able to do that. A couple more questions here. Would the relief factor help? What relief factor? Some of these comments here as of late, probably a good time to wrap it up. McConnell, Ryan mentioned here. Oh, there you go. I got you. But Brunson looks okay, but got locked up by Mac. Never heard McConnell called Mac. But he's been one of their best defenders this series on him just because he's a pain in the ass. He's a pest. You hear us all talking about it. You hear the TV talking about it as well. Doc Rivers couldn't talk about him enough in the first series, how he really appreciates his game because of how hard he plays every single time. And that's why he's in year 9 in the NBA. A guy that went undrafted, that Philadelphia didn't want after his rookie contract expired. You hang around by doing things that nobody else wants to do. And Ethan, this will be our last one. A lesser talked aspect of the run is how it affects Rick's tenure with the team. Yeah, to an extent, I agree, because this is year 3, but he and his coaching staff signed a contract extension before this season. Now, notably, Rick all told us how much or how long his first contract was, the 4-year deal. But since this extension, the Pacers have kept it all quiet, which I think is very interesting, that they have not wanted it out there of the terms of the deal, especially the length there. So that is definitely something to be watching here in the years to come of what things look like. Because you're right, if they lost the first round, or if they lost this round 3-1 or 4-1, and didn't fight, didn't have a response, you would have people talking about, a change in guidance and leadership there. Now, you got to remember where things were at the beginning of the season, where the general manager, Chad Buchanan, the coaching staff weren't talking about the playoffs at all. The players were. Then you acquire Pascal Siakam, and everyone on the Pacers kind of changed their tune. I said all along I thought the Pacers would win, would be about above 500. So you're talking 43, 44 wins. And they did that. I thought they'd have at least a 6 seed. And they did that, got the 6th seed. Now, I thought they'd be slightly better after acquiring Siakam, 4th or 5th, and they really should have. If I remember right, if the Pacers would have won, what was the second to last game, maybe against the Toronto Raptors, or maybe it was the Knicks, actually. Either way, the Pacers had won that game, they would have had the home court advantage in this series. That's how tight it was from like spots 2 to 6. It was that tight to go around. The thing I love about the coaching staff is besides Lloyd, I can't see anyone getting plucked to be a head coach. Yeah, I can see that. Maybe Jenny Busick eventually. Ronald Nora previously, I thought he would be a head coach. And quite frankly, I think he messed up when he left Brad Stevens in Boston to take the Charlotte job and then come here to Indiana. If he stayed in the Boston system, I almost guarantee you he is the Celtics head coach who took over for Ime Udoka after that kind of scandal broke a couple of years ago. I have no doubt about that because Ime was a behind-the-bench coach. Or excuse me, not Ime. Joe Mazzulla was a behind-the-bench coach. Then he took over. Relief Factor's a TV commercial. Oh, gotcha. See, during these road games and when I'm watching, I don't watch any commercials. I got League Pass that shows me inside the arena. So I'm not watching any of the commercials during this Pacers playoff run. A funny and lighthearted way is a good way to end this live post-game show. This is the longest that we have been gone. It's the most attended post-game show. So I appreciate all of you for joining in after the Pacers 121-89 Game 4 win. Pacers have 2 wins. Knicks have 2 wins. It's now a best-of-3 series. Pacers to win will have either way. Pacers will have to win at least one game on the road if they want to advance in the postseason. I'm very curious what the depth and health of the Knicks look like going into Game 5, which will be played Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and will be airing nationally on TNT. I appreciate all of those who join me live here on YouTube and all the rest of you who maybe watch the replay of this or listen to it on the Fieldhouse Files podcast. I will not have one of these after Tuesday's game. First one I will miss in 11 games, and that's because I will be on special assignment. I will be in Connecticut for Caitlin Clark's debut with the Fever as they play the Connecticut Sun, coached by Stephanie White, former Indiana Mr. Basketball, Purdue standout. That game's at Mohegan Sun Arena on Tuesday at 7:30. So I will be there and covering that. A monster story, certainly in all of basketball, not just here in Indiana. I mean, the only Fever home preseason game had more than 31 media members in the post-game press conference. There aren't that many in the Pacers playoff post-game press conference. It is a massive story that goes outside of basketball. So that's where I will be Tuesday night, live coverage from Connecticut. More coverage here on my YouTube page as well as on fieldhousefiles.com. Hope everyone had a good Mother's Day, had a great Sunday, and I will talk to you again soon.